Hey, good afternoon, Lily.
Hello, Gino.
Nice to have you here. This is your first conversation with us. This show is thanks to the Public Access Channel. It's part of my state-of-the-art programs, and I invite various artists, local and nearby. Since you have not been here before, why don't you tell us in a few words where you started and where you live and what you enjoy doing. A few words.
A few words. I'll try and sum up about 45 years quickly. And Gino, let me say thank you for inviting me. It's really
You're
quite
most welcome.
wonderful.
It's my pleasure.
So to come back to your question, I have been in clay a very long time. And I started in clay in the, my gosh, I think it was in the 60s, when clay was actually a very different place from what it is today.
Absolutely.
And it was a time with flower children and a back to nature, and where clay was seen as
an inferior category versus ceramics.
well, not necessarily. I think the whole issue of ceramic craft versus art came up later.
Yeah.
But in the very days that I began, it was part of what would get you back to nature, what was natural, what would bring you a healthier, more fulfilling life if you lived closer to the earth, if you will, and clay is certainly earth. So, that is where I started.
Yes, and did you go to a special school or you learned by yourself?
Well, I have to say, in total, I'm self-taught.
That's great.
Though I did start when my kids were very young and I was looking for something to do, I started at the Brooklyn Museum. And I studied then on with wheel, ceramic, as you can see, original work, with a gentleman named Tom Suomalainen.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, I started studying with Dr. Sam Sug-Chen, who was a Chinese, maybe I should say is.
There's a Chinese influence.
Yes. And I picked up the brush painting, and that's what I started to apply to my forms. It was a great joy to use the brush as a way of decoration. So these two pieces really show the early work that I was doing, and these are both wheel thrown.
So you had love for flowers, vegetation, before moving into a new home, because now I thought you said that you enjoy gardening and that's where you went even closer to nature. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the delights of moving into Westchester for me was that we moved out of Brooklyn, where we had a very tiny garden behind our house, and we moved to a place where I have about a third of an acre open to growing flowers and vegetation, and
so space,
I love it.
The space around your home also allowed you to feel for sculpture more and more. And that's because I did notice that some of your sculptures around are like this one, for example, quite interesting.
Yes, I was always fascinated by faces, and I brought a small piece to show yet another example of faces. But when I went larger, you're absolutely right, elbow room was crucial.
Yes.
To have the studio space to create pieces this size.
Yes,
and
because these are pretty large.
They are.
Yeah, pretty large.
And it was conceived as a grouping of faces that were meant to, in a sense, enhance each other, speak to each other, maybe show how people really need each other. Whether or not they're in the same space, they need each other for support and community and...
I see, and this brings up two things in my mind. I know you've done social work in the prisons, and you have been exposed to humanity in that sense. At the same time, I must confess, many artists are quite easy to classify, say, oh, that's an energetic, that's vibrant, that's this, that's that. With you, I have a serious problem.
Oh.
Serious problem. I cannot find an adjective to quickly define you because your personality, besides your work, is, I started, she's unassuming. How can I push her to talk? She's humble. She's totally relaxed. It's difficult to, she's so modest, you know, to make her talk. I don't know if I can make her talk. She's unostentatious.
Oh dear.
She's unpretentious. She's a quiet person. She's reserved. I mean, what are you? Please, how come you are all these things and I cannot put one that really labels, you know? It's impossible to label
I
it.
apologize to you, Gino, but the problem is yours. I'm unwilling to categorize myself. I am whatever I am, and I put out in clay whatever is in my heart.
Yeah, I know that. And for example, I know that some of this work is in Yonkers, I believe, right?
This work started out, yeah, exactly.
City Hall in the gardens?
No, it actually started out after winning an Arts Westchester grant.
Oh.
And I was able to put up this first set of sculpture on DeSanti Plaza, which is in Hartsdale, right by the train station.
Yes.
It was open at that time. The county executive opened that to art installation.
Oh.
So the first installation that I had was there. But people enjoyed it. It was really more the previous picture. People enjoyed it. There was a lot of very, very good feedback about it. So the county executive invited me to bring it to actually the Westchester County lawn. And I did an installation. I moved it to Westchester. And from there, I was invited to move it to Yonkers. And Yonkers opened up a sculpture garden right adjacent to the...
Next to City Hall.
Next to City Hall.
Yeah, basically.
And so this was the first exhibit.
Okay, that's where I first noted, I noted your work in one of the publication of the City Hall.
Yes.
And that's the public gardens. Okay, now this work is basically clay and...
It's all clay,
Yes.
except for the supports.
How do you finish it?
Well, those particular pieces, because I knew they were going to be outdoor pieces, were high fired. I mean, high meaning cone 10, which is somewhere up around.
So they go into a kiln and...
Yeah, they go into a kiln.
Yeah.
They were glazed with a particular
So-
brown glaze, as it
Yes.
were, which would melt at this very high temperature.
So it becomes part of the substance.
It is absorbed
Yeah,
and
yeah,
integrated
yeah.
with the surface.
What is, I know that in some of the description of your work, you've been saying that you like the raku process.
Yeah.
Can you explain to ignorant people like me and everybody else who listens, what is the raku process?
It's a different way of firing, and it's a technique that actually came to us from, I guess from Asia, probably Japan, but probably China as well. It's very low fire. Let me contrast that those pieces, which were meant to stay outdoors and weather, this process is not meant to be placed outdoor and in the weather. It will over time disintegrate, and that's because of the difference in
So
temperature.
the raku has a surface which is more fragmented, doesn't resist to weather conditions.
That's right, the clay
Okay,
never
so
comes
it's
up.
more internal.
Right.
It's more like graphic works on clay.
It is more ephemeral, it is more ethereal, but
Yes.
it gives you a different surface. And maybe I can point
Yes.
to that with
Sure.
this. I don't know what's visible, because the surface accepts carbon in the process, and it's an interesting process.
Yes.
I will describe it, but it also gives you iridescence.
Yes, I know that.
You get a certain range of color and iridescence which you get no other way. So I've come to love it for the unpredictability and for the beauty of the surface.
So now what happens if something you tried and attempted doesn't come the way you wanted? You just use the word unpredictability. I did not use it. So, no, because a lot of art, let's face it, in the whole world, all types, all techniques, unpredictability is something that artists enjoy. They play on it. They don't want to be classified, be in a category, be in a square, be in a frame, right?
Well, then I have to go actually to describe what happens in raku. In raku, first of all, you do it outdoors because of all the smoke. So you heat up your pieces to about 1800 degrees.
Oh.
And the glaze that you use has to be a glaze that will
You can take
melt at 1800 degrees.
Yeah.
Once you see it start melting, you pull it out red hot. You pull it out with iron tongs, and you place it in a container that has something combustible, which usually is sawdust, leaves, straw, anything that will burn newspaper.
So you will add additional heat to it?
So that it catches fire.
It catches fire, but at
You
the same
wait
time,
for flames
the
to
heat
happen.
changes.
The heat is cooling down. It's
But
never as hot as
Oh,
the
because it's right,
1800
it's always
degrees.
it's less than 1800.
As
Yes.
soon as you have flame, you cap it. And you let the piece sit in the smoke. Because what happens is flame will go out because it lacks oxygen, but it creates a lot of smoke. And the smoke is carbon. And carbon, usually carbon monoxide. And what monoxide is an unstable situation. You're looking for carbon dioxide. So it goes to the minerals that are in the glaze itself, which are all oxides.
So
And it pulls out one of the...
So it's in a dark chamber and it forces some other reactions.
Exactly.
Okay.
And these reactions produce the iridescence.
Okay, interesting. I guess John and I had never heard of this before. So we're really surprised.
So it's a very quick firing.
Yeah.
It's as spontaneous. And to know where the smoke is actually going to hit your piece, that's unpredictable.
Now there are other items that have impressed me while I was looking at quantity of work you created, and I found this quite attractive. These are people who talk to me without talking.
I'm glad.
Right?
I'm glad to have a conversation with you,
Yes.
because they do with me.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
They do.
You created a space, a person, without defining it too much. At the same time, seems this person has some contents.
Yeah.
Is it?
It's something I always look for. I became especially interested in faces. I always was, but when I worked at Rikers Island as a social worker, I was working in mental health. And one of the things you have to do is not just hear the story, you have to really look and see.
And feel a person.
Feel whether, is this real, is this not real? Is this covering up a great sadness? Is this...
Yes, so it's gut feeling, instinct, intuition.
But also how you read a face.
Right. The previous artists we were talking with, we were just talking about the fact that intuition is a major way to access art. And most people are afraid of looking at art. But in reality, it's not that difficult if you try. It's like trying to ride a bicycle. You fail the first time.
I know, but you learn the skill and then you enjoy it so much.
This is a totally different world here. Look at this. Tell me something about this.
Okay, so you're switching me to something else because...
Oh, you don't want to then?
No. There is a connection because in looking at how to place a face, how even to make a face, without it seeming carved out of the clay, but emerging from the clay. I started to play with, I would say this is more a craft technique, but it's really handling clay without putting your fingerprints so much on it. In this one, here I'm stretching the clay, I'm throwing the clay, and then I'm folding it.
Oh, folding. Yes.
Here is a much, I would say more, in a certain sense, rigid approach. I'm just cutting out a box form, and here I'm playing with stains and color.
Here it's really form of a sculpture,
Yes.
while here it's just a representation of
Right.
of a standing item. Or,
Right,
okay.
and with the emphasis being how will I decorate it? This is raku fired, so I just let the fire do the decorating.
And I know that the variation, the quantity, the different styles of decoration you use. Look at this, for example.
Yeah, it was all
And so
looking at,
that's the Oriental feeling, but this is more Middle Easterner,
yes.
right? Am I wrong, or am I?
No, you were right, you're
Okay,
right.
here I could be anywhere in the Middle East. I could be near a desert, could be in Saudi Arabia, whatever, or in Israel, whatever.
Exactly.
But this is anywhere around China, that Asian continent.
So look how many influences can come to us. Just go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Oh, yeah.
And
We have access to so many
to
things.
so many.
It's just that so many people don't do it. I teach to seniors with the parks the department, and I know that many people are afraid of art. Majority are afraid of art.
Really?
But now, what does it mean, hot flashes? I want to know, because he never mentioned he had hot flashes.
Well, it was certainly related to a time in my life,
Oh,
but it was also meant, I had a one-woman show at the Clay Arts Center,
oh.
and this was the title I gave it. It
Well,
was also, flashes of inspiration,
Yes,
flashes
I
of
know, I
imagination,
understand.
as
And-
well as the fact that
And
it gets,
this is, I like the arrangement of the faces in a different way, like that. It's sort of, it's just decorative by itself, just by the sequence. Like, looks
Yeah.
like progressive numbers or diminishing numbers.
right.
It's like that, I enjoy that. Again, let's go back to your Oriental world. Again, I see a lot of that, right?
Well, again, in my functional work, when I was looking how to enhance the surface, I played with Oriental design. And usually flowers.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, it was really my love.
Yeah, I remember I traveled with someone else in Japan, and we visited a group of 30, 40 artists, and all of a sudden my companion in the trip says, you know what happened? This guy, very important guy, he has a tremendous job at these particular photographic companies. He took me in the corner in the side, and he started showing me 1,000 photos of flowers, because that's the love. That's the love. And the guy, he was at one of the highest levels in business, and that was his love.
Yes.
Flowers.
Yeah.
Flowers. So to us it seemed funny, because you never expect a really businessman to be into their business unless they are in fashion or something like that.
Well, they're very compelling, they're very beautiful.
Yes, so flowers is an expression of beauty from nature,
Absolutely.
right? Now, these are tremendous works. In my analysis of your work, to me, these are some of the best pieces. Tell me something.
Well, these faces came into being really they really started about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we went into war.
So it's about sufferance.
It is really about suffering, it's about
Yes,
repression, it's about stopping
right.
truth, it's about
Right.
women and...
About society and problems of society
Yeah.
and people
And,
being
and-
limited in talking.
Yeah, and I think it's a Western, in my case, I would say, a Western response to the very beginning information about burqas, about women in Muslim countries that have very few freedoms, that are so in many ways controlled by a patriarchal society.
And these
So
are
all
really
of this played out.
perfect images for someone involved in community activities whom I happen to know. Okay, but from a technical standpoint, there is a series, of course, here there is a contents reaction, but from an aesthetic point of view, don't you see also the beauty of the darkness and the surface of the colors?
Of course.
Is that what you were searching?
That again is Raku, and what one could do to get a range, and very naturally imposed range of color
Okay,
on
okay,
your clay.
good. Now, continuing looking at your work, which is so much, it's unreal, and the quality. Look at this. These are two like, could reflect anything. Could be African image of women, could be Abyssinian Madonnas. You see, in Abyssinia there is a lot of Christianity, and they, you put one of these in one of their churches, it will fit very well. And there is an Abyssinian church in Israel as well. So you get a sort of feeling, at the same time, I get a feeling that they're like flowers. What do you feel?
Well, I have never made that association, Gina, and that's a wonderful thing to hear.
Yeah, it's a
As
flower
though some-
opening up. Look at a rose that sticks up the head
Out of its
Petals.
bud
out of the bud.
starts to flower.
So you have the ability with your work to suggest these things better than just reproducing them. What did you feel in reality when you did this?
My love of these little figures and how clay can fold and then suggest is something I'm even pursuing right now. These are, I call them my little philosophers, because that I always felt they looked inward and they were searching for some answers or some muse or philosophy. I think they are an expression of that out of me, this searching for philosophy or for how to live, what is important in life.
So it's part of your communication skills. Okay, now, there is these two we didn't touch, but they are part of the previous faces.
This was part of the exhibition that went
Yeah.
up first in December.
And here there is more than one face, right? There's
Yes.
two in general, whatever.
That's right.
Is there a reason, because you did want the dialogue stronger?
Yes, because people, as I said, even when you're alone, you're single, you need community. But there are family associations, so I saw this, actually I saw this, I called them my grandparents, but this is a couple.
Yeah.
This is a husband and wife, and they create a community among themselves. And this is a mother and child, and that is a community and a communication.
Back in that time,
Now in the near future, do you have any shows planned, or do you have anything special you want to talk about?
I'm going to take this in turns. This, yes, here is a face, and here's somebody talking to him.
Yeah,
You have to look.
it must be me hiding behind and telling him, you don't talk, don't say anything. No, that's interesting. That's it's a real story.
It is a real
So
story.
it's a story.
It's a real story.
So now you're becoming a storyteller.
I hope
So
so.
no longer ceramist. Ceramist.
A little
Okay,
bit of
how
it.
about this one? We didn't talk about this one.
This one is not yet finished, but it is again, just placing the
Oh.
face in something.
You're coming out of the shell
Cloudy,
here. You're
yeah.
opening a shell.
And
And
yes,
That's what
emerging.
it is.
And
You're-
now we're
you're
gonna push
bursting.
aside
So
and
it again
emerge.
goes back to those Madonnas that look like flowers sticking their head out.
Yeah,
And
and this one is pushing his way through.
and this one is pushing the way through. So it says, Jay, just a minute, I got something to say. No, it's really
True.
interesting. And you know why it's good? Because I say it's good.
All right.
And if I
You
say,
say it,
it's
Gino.
state of the
We
art,
know
so look
that's
at
good.
this surface. It's so big. You could have made it so small, but you didn't.
Ah,
That's the ratio between this opening and the rest of the surface that give the message. Okay, do you want to say anything else about this one, or we let it be?
Well, this one is my dreamer,
This
if
one,
I hold it up.
can
This
you?
is- Yeah, I think so. So here's my sleeping man and his dreaming, which in this case is not so
Oh,
pleasant.
I see he's laying down horizontal, yes. But I see a bird is coming down.
Yeah,
Is that a message?
there is a message.
Okay.
And birds are messengers.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
And it's,
So I hope it's a good message, but I don't know yet. I don't think he knows yet, or she knows
well,
yet. what the
maybe
message is.
it's Gabriel talking to Muhammad.
Perhaps it is.
It could be,
It
huh?
could be,
Most
and it
people
should
don't
be.
realize there
It really
was
should be.
dialogue in the past, but not much today.
Which is unfortunate.
It's
So
unfortunate.
they should talk a little
And,
more.
and now I noted that recently, in the last couple of years or so, you've taken interest in going to painting as
I've
a
started to paint.
yeah, and I noticed some of your work, and I see you're really beautifying your husband because I know him pretty well, and
So I have tended to paint my family.
yes, it looks like
And
yes, it's all
as you can see, I still like faces.
you
I have not
face.
given up faces.
Yes.
So you are looking at, I'm introducing my family.
Yes.
Here is my husband,
She is
Robert.
Lily Shaw family, and she's introducing all of them to you, and in a realistic fashion,
Yeah.
with no deformation. She's not expressionist, she's figurative, natural, realistic, and try not to be too photographic. It's photographic enough, but not too much. That's the way
That
I would define it.
See it.
Okay, so now it's up to you to close our conversation by telling us what else we have not touched on.
I see. Well, one last piece. This is a vase, and it's
Oh, I see.
and it again is folding clay, using clay in its with as much of its personality, I should say, as one can, but also glaze. This is high fire
Yeah,
glaze.
and it's-
So this is a white glaze.
Yes.
It's actually a Gino glaze that's placed on the piece with a little bit of extra.
And you probably didn't even realize you painted Japanese all of a sudden.
No, I made a character here.
Oh,
I have a
you did?
feeling.
Oh, you did?
No, I didn't. I just
I thought you were
pointed
gonna
and where it
picture
went, it
Yeah,
went.
there it is,
But
there
there
it
it
is, in Japan. And all we need is to walk under these woods. Okay, well, what is coming next? Any exhibition, anything you're gonna do?
No, I have some work that's going into Blue Door.
Good.
They are presenting a collaborative show, and because I do have an art salon that meets at my house once a week,
Yes,
we are going into that as
Okay.
part of our collaborative
okay.
Presentation.
Best wishes for that.
Thank you. And I will have a piece at the Rockland County Center for the Arts,
Okay,
which is in one of their upcoming shows.
good. Do you have a website that people can visit more your work, or you don't?
I do not.
Okay, but so if anyone wants to look for your work, has to go Google you,
Is
like
it-
I did, and they will find various references to previous exhibitions and comments
Yeah.
and photos.
I would only add to that, that because Blue Door does a wonderful thing, and it allows use of their
Space.
space application for their members
Yes,
to
yes.
show work. I do
Yes.
have work on Blue Door.
Absolutely, Blue Door has been
Website.
essential to the arts. I've been living here over 40 years, and I know that without Blue Door,
Yeah,
today we would not have 5 art galleries.
yeah.
Blue Door was the first one really to.
That really developed downtown.
Yeah, we had to
Yonkers.
thank Louis Berman. Well, fortunately, he's been invited here 3 times, and every time he had